Live starts right now. Hey, Ed.
Brett, good to see you. That's a fun story. Welcome, everybody. Breaking tonight, can we call it the Trump rally? From Wall Street to the world stage, the president seems to be back on offense tonight. Early this week, his critics were mocking the president for that Dow dive on Christmas Eve. NBC News was claiming he'd be the first commander-in-chief to skip a holiday trip to see our men and women in uniform since 2002. And the president himself was tweeting about being, well, home alone at the White House. Well, what a difference a couple of days make. Good evening, everybody. I'm Ed Henry, in for Martha McCallum. Hope you had a wonderful Christmas. Here at home today, in a stunning reversal, the stock market saw its biggest daily point gain ever. That's right, ever. And abroad, the president, who's been under fire for never visiting a combat zone as president, did just that, boarding a secret overnight flight from Maryland to Iraq to surprise troops on the ground there and thank them for spending Christmas far, far from home.
The reason I'm here today is to personally thank you and every service member throughout this region for the near elimination of the ISIS territorial caliphate in Iraq and in Syria. 2 years ago, when I became president, they were a very dominant group. They were very dominant. Today, they're not so dominant anymore.
Not so dominant. You hear the cheers, the selfies, the handshakes, lots of smiles at Al-Assad Air Base as the president and First Lady Melania Trump spent 3 hours on the ground there. The president also used the visit to take the reins back, perhaps, on border security. Just days ago, he seemed to be backtracking about the wall.
The barrier, wall, or steel slats, whatever you want to call it, it's all the same.
But earlier today, he appeared to return to campaign mode and was talking tough.
How long do you think the shutdown will last, Mr. President?
Whatever it takes. I mean, we're going to have a wall. We're going to have safety.
Well, in moments, Homeland Security Committee member Congressman Peter King joins me live with more on this historic trip and, more importantly, perhaps, what comes next in the showdown over the wall. But first, our senior political correspondent Mike Emanuel is live in Washington with more on the president's secret visit. Good evening, Mike.
Ed, good evening. President Trump's visit to Iraq is a traditional move by a commander-in-chief during a holiday period to thank our troops for their service a long way from home. The President and First Lady's visit was full of secrecy, with their security obviously a concern. This president has made withdrawing the United States from foreign wars a priority. This location in Iraq is significant as U.S. and coalition forces have been successful in retaking Mosul and liberating significant territory across the border in Syria. And the president noted the great job American troops have done in taking the fight to ISIS.
I looked at a map, and 2 years ago it was a lot of red all over that map. And now you have a couple little spots, and that's happening very quickly.
The President and First Lady are due to make a second stop before heading back to the White House. Before leaving, the Commander-in-Chief told troops there he does not plan to withdraw from Iraq. He says he sees using it as a military base to launch operations in Syria and against the Islamic State. An important part of the Commander-in-Chief's visit to a combat zone was clearly focused on saying thank you to our men and women in uniform.
We came to Al-Assad to share our eternal gratitude for everything you do to keep America safe, strong, and free.
This trip also comes as the president's defense secretary, Jim Mattis, is on his way out. Mattis announced his resignation last week and was highly critical of the president's foreign policy. So the president bumped up the change at the Pentagon to New Year's Day about 2 months early. The president's critics, like actress Alyssa Milano, tweeted this afternoon, Trump becomes first president since 2002 not to visit troops at Christmas time. Too soon? The president was on his way. A day after calling troops around the world to wish them a Merry Christmas, he went to see some in person. Ed?
All right, Mike Emanuel, good job out of you. Appreciate it. Here now, Republican Congressman Peter King, who serves on the House Homeland Security Committee. Good evening, sir. Merry Christmas.
Thank you, Ed. You too.
You know, as Mike said, it wasn't just Hollywood stars. You had NBC News, his critics again thinking they've got the president cornered. Look at this headline, sir. NBC News, Trump becomes first president since 2002 not to visit troops at Christmas time. Meanwhile, within hours, he's in the air doing just that, sir.
Yeah, I know President Trump gets angry at the media for their biased reporting,
but in many ways they're his best ally because they always overshoot, they always exaggerate, and they always put him in a position where he ends up on top. So again, this does show, though, the rush to judgment the media always has against President Trump. And again, he had planned on going anyway, but this, again, outsmarted the media. That was not his main motive. That's certainly the way it worked out.
So, Congressman, on a more important policy decision, which is something that some Republicans have been upset about as well, which is about pulling troops out of Syria, as well as half the troops out of Afghanistan. I wonder if his critics as well maybe jumped to conclusions at the front and thought, aha, this is a huge mistake, without hearing the details. Listen to what the president said, or I'm sorry, this is actually a quote from a story about what he said on the ground in Iraq. He said, if we see something happening with ISIS that we don't like, we can hit them so fast and so hard, they really won't know what the hell happened. We've knocked them silly. So the idea being that the troops that are still there, thousands of them, about 5,200, are in Iraq and could help in Syria. Isn't that an idea that perhaps the critics were overshooting at first again, sir?
I think that certainly serves to mitigate some of the concern. Now, to be honest with you, Ed, I disagree with this policy to come out of Syria the way it was done. But again, I think if he articulates this and continues to, that the fact our troops in Iraq can be used in Syria if they have to be, that'll go a long way to alleviate and to mitigate some of the concerns that people had about Iraq. Because ISIS still is very dangerous. And I don't want to create a vacuum that the Russians and the Iranians can fill. But again, the fact that he showed his willingness to use the American troops in Iraq to carry out a mission in Syria if they have to, if ISIS develops again, to me, did go a considerable way toward alleviating that concern.
On the other hand, when he talks about the fact that ISIS, when he took the presidency, had territory about the size of Ohio, he talked about those red dots on the map, and now they have about 1% of that, sir. Is this a victory he has not gotten credit for?
Oh, yeah, definitely. Listen, he has done a phenomenal job in going after terrorism, on taking some of the restrictions off the military, on giving the generals and the military the power and the authority they need. No, this has been overwhelmingly successful, what he has done against ISIS. My only question was, I think there's still a remnant of ISIS and it could be resurrected. But having said that, no, this has been really the great untold story of the last 2 years, is the devastating impact that this president has had on ISIS. Remember, several years ago, ISIS was the unstoppable force. They had the caliphate. Right. They were marching right through the Middle East, and now they are, again, a far, far less potent force than they were, and the president deserves full credit for that. Absolutely.
All right, Congressman, let's bring it back here at home now. As you know, the president also had some in his own party concerned about the policy on immigration. And was he faltering a bit? Was he softening on the push for a wall? Did he alleviate some doubts today by saying, whatever it takes, there's going to be a wall?
Yeah, he did. But let me tell you where I'm coming from. I strongly support the wall. In fact, I was one of the authors of the bill back in 2006, which passed the Congress calling for 700 miles of security. And it was supported by many Democrats at the time. So the Democrats are being totally hypocritical. I just have a thing against government shutdowns. I think they end up being counterproductive. But now that we're in it, I think it's important for the president and the Democrats to come to the table, find a way to negotiate a compromise here. But to me, the wall is essential. I wouldn't have shut down the government over it, but it is shut down now. So let's find a way out of it, and it should be done by the Democrats conceding that there has to be a wall. The president is right about that.
Congressman, I got 30 seconds. What's next then? How does the president get out of this? As you say, you support his push for the wall. You're glad he did that, but you're not excited about the government being partially shut down. Democrats don't seem to want to negotiate with him.
No, and I think the president, what they can do is make, which I think Mick Mulvaney sort of hinted at, they can make some concessions as far as the total amount. And then I would also suggest that perhaps the Republicans could also do something on DACA, but in return for that, the Democrats will have to commit to the wall. Otherwise, the president, I don't see how he gets out of this otherwise. I don't see the end game without that.
Congressman Peter King, we appreciate you coming in.
Thank you, Ed. Thank you.
Here now, Jason Riley, Wall Street Journal columnist, senior fellow at the Manhattan Institute, and Jessica Tarlow. She's a Democratic strategist and senior director of research at Bustle.com. She's also, of course, a Fox News contributor. Good to see you both.
Hi, Ed.
Good to see you. Jason, the president had some concerns among Republicans, both with the Syria policy, as just mentioned, as well as the wall. Has he alleviated some of those concerns in his own party?
You mean with the trip overseas? Does he alleviate those concerns?
Yeah, the trip may be changing the subject a bit, but also while over there making it clear, that he's had a big victory on ISIS when you look at the territory that they had when he took the presidency and where they are now, but also making it clear to reporters there after seeming to be on defense at the beginning of the week, talking to be home alone at the White House. He got out of the White House. He goes over to see the troops, but says, look, whatever it takes, we're going to have the wall.
I think that was the right thing to do. I'm glad he went. I think it is a morale booster for our men and women in uniform. And in the current context, I think it was an important trip, too. With the Mattis resignation, Mattis is someone, and some of the other officials that are leaving, who was held in very high regard by the rank and file in the military. And I think it was important to reassure our men and women in uniform that he has their back, that he has the best interest of the country in mind. And also, as the previous interview with Representative King showed, there is some skepticism about how he handled that pullout of the announcement, of the timing of the announcement, and who he shared this information with ahead of time. And it's not just in the House. You have people like Tom Cotton, the Senate, big supporter of Trump, nevertheless was very critical of this move. So yes, I do think he did a little bit to reassure them, but I think there is some more work to be done on that front.
Sure. Now, Jessica, obviously, one positive trip doesn't erase the fact that he has real difficulties perhaps ahead, finding who's the next defense secretary, dealing with the fact that James Mattis left in a very messy way. We can't sweep that under the carpet. On the other hand, don't some of his critics look a little silly by saying he's the first one not to visit the troops when they didn't throw this together in 3 or 4 hours because of a tweet? This had to be in the works.
Yes, and I will just admit right up front that I fell for it as well. So I'm putting that out there. I didn't think that he was leaving. I thought he was all alone there ruining Christmas for 7-year-olds all over the country. And I was thrilled to see that he did go.
We're going to get to that later in the show, believe me.
Okay, good. But it was a great thing for the troops where he went. I do see now that Newsweek is reporting that because of a video that he posted, he's revealed identities of members of SEAL Team 5 who are there on covert operations. That's something I'm sure we'll hear more about as the evening progresses. But no doubt this was the right thing to do, bringing Melania as well. There aren't many first ladies that actually go into conflict zones. It seemed to be a very meaningful experience for those who are there. But to Jason's point, I don't think it alleviates concerns over the pullout from Syria. When he was addressing the troops, he said, I said to the generals who are in Syria, you got 6 months. And then I gave them 6 months, and I said, you got 6 months, and now you just got to get out of there. I don't know what kind of policy that is, and Jim Mattis clearly didn't know what kind of policy that is, so that's outstanding.
Yeah, Jason and Jessica, I want you to hear something that Maxine Waters said on Sunday.
I'm not surprised at anything that the president may do or say. I have warned America from the beginning that this president is not worthy. He should not be there, that he cannot be trusted. He's a liar. He's despicable. We need to get rid of this president.
Jason, even if the president did not handle the shutdown perfectly, how does he negotiate with a Democratic Party that has leaders like Maxine Waters saying he's a liar, he needs to get out?
Well, you're not going to negotiate with Maxine Waters, but she can be a thorn in his side. She's going to be head of one of these committees that will have oversight duties come January. So he's someone, she's someone he is going to have to deal with eventually. But in terms of the shutdown, Ed, I think both sides still think they have something to gain politically from this. The Democrats enjoy accusing people who support border security of being racist. They think that helps them with their base. And Trump thinks that his base wants to see him to continue to be engaged on this issue. And so I think he's become convinced that if he doesn't get some of this funding for his wall, he is jeopardizing his re-election chances, frankly. And so I think you're going to see him continue to push it.
Jessica, let's give you a fair chance to get in here. I realize that Pelosi and Schumer are the leaders who are negotiating on the shutdown, but Maxine Waters is going to be a committee chair.
Yeah, absolutely. But I would say when you look at what President Obama had to do when he was dealing with Trey Gowdy, Mark Meadows, Devin Nunes, etc., they don't sound all that different, maybe in tone than Maxine Waters, but the content of what they were saying, people who were out there with the lock her up stuff and going after Democrats in a very politically motivated way, whether it was the IRS hearings, Benghazi, or any of the others. I don't think it's that dissimilar from what's going on right now with Maxine Waters. And Jerry Nadler has said that he is not going for impeachment. And there are real concerns here about what the Trump members of the Trump administration cabinet members and his own family have done in terms of taking advantage of the office, and they should be investigated.
Well, one person's political hearings is another person's oversight, I suppose, depending on who's in power. Jessica, Jason, appreciate both coming in.
Thanks a lot.
Thank you. Thank you. Up next, new call for the president to go it alone to get the wall. Could he use executive power to bypass Congress and get the money he needs to just go ahead and build it?
But the president is committed to making sure that one way or another, whether it's through Congress or other measures, that we protect our borders, and he's looking at a number of different ways in order to do that.
How long do you think the shutdown will last, Mr. President?
Whatever it takes. I mean, we're going to have a wall. We're going to have safety. We need safety for our country.
President Trump there vowing to finally deliver on a border wall despite that standstill in Washington over how to get it funded and reopen the government. Some now saying the president should exercise his executive power to bypass Congress altogether, writing, quote, he has the funds available and the authority to build the wall on his own. The only question is whether President Trump will finally start taking advice from those who actually support his goals rather than continuing to trust the internal obstructionist. Joining me now is the author of that piece, Brett Decker. He's an assistant professor of business at Defiance College and co-author of the book, The Conservative Case for Trump. Good evening. Good to have you tonight.
Hey, Merry Christmas. Great to be on.
All right. Merry Christmas. So let's explain first, what do you believe the president can and cannot do with his executive power?
Yeah, sure. That's the fundamental question. Is a couple of weeks ago, the White House put out a directive to the executive branch agencies asking if they could find pots of money that they could use to build the wall. And there's money all over the executive branch that can be used, right? The federal budget's $4 trillion, and people are claiming that they don't have nickels to rub together to come up with $5 billion. So there are all these different initiatives, and I think the one I find the most interesting, there are $200 billion in loans that the Department of Agriculture gives out for rural development. And these are basically like bank loans where they give loans out to rural communities to build fire stations, even walls, retaining walls. So these get paid back. They have a super low default rate, so they'd be very attractive to be part of an investment portfolio. Yeah.
Sure, it may be attractive,
so I
but
think
pardon
they should
me,
just sell these. Yeah.
Right, but you know the Congress has to authorize issues and pots of money, as you say, and then appropriate it. So the president's own acting chief of staff at the White House has said that they can't just move money around that quickly. Do you believe that they just don't understand the process, or, as you say, there are people on the inside who are undermining the president somehow?
Yeah, I mean, people who are against the president's agenda are always going to be naysayers. They're always going to come up with reasons why you can't do anything. But there's always this fight between presidents and Congress over how an executive can spend money that's already been allocated or is already out there. So, right, even George Washington fought with Congress over it. So I think what the president has to do is just do it. Right, Obama sent $1.7 billion to Iran. In cash. Well, that didn't get approved by Congress. So
yeah, where did he get that? Congress obviously did not authorize or appropriate that. Pardon me, I didn't mean to talk over you, but Congress clearly didn't appropriate that money, that cash, to go to Iran.
Sure, and during the Bush administration, lots of war funding was moved around. You had kind of lots of sort of secret operations. So I think, right, this is something President Trump was elected to do something about immigration. Congress can't even pass a budget, right, let alone do anything on a controversial issue like the wall. So I think President Trump needs to kind of just do it and force the issue. Other presidents do this and get away with it. So I think this president needs to do it. And I think it's his turn. Yeah.
Brett, pardon me, I know we have a difference in the satellite there, but should the president just do it? That's what some Democrats were saying to Harry Reid a few years ago about the nuclear option with judicial nominations, and it backfired on them. I seem to remember Republicans shouting at President Obama about overstepping his executive power on DACA and other issues. Would this blow up in the Republicans' face if the president starts moving money around?
I think actually it's a great question. I think it's actually the opposite. I think what's going to blow up in Republicans' faces, both in Congress and the White House, is if they don't do something about immigration. Their majorities in President Trump's election were based on addressing this issue. President Trump said he'd get the wall built in his first 2 years. Well, the 2 years are up. Democrats are control the House in January, no funding is going to pass in the next 2 years with a divided Congress. So I think this is the president's only option.
Brett, you're certainly right. With Democrats in charge of the House, they're not going to be funding the wall, at least not to the levels the president wants. And there is a lot of frustration in the president's own party about Republicans running the House and not getting that job done. Brett, we appreciate you coming in tonight.
Great. Thanks for having me on.
All right. Up next, the new poll from Democrats showing they'd settle for just about anyone on the ballot in 2020 except, Hillary Clinton. Former Pennsylvania governor and DNC chair Ed Rendell's here live, as well as Carl Lowe. They're coming up next.
Do you want to run again?
No.
Wait.
No.
That was a pause.
Well, I'd like to be president.
Okay.
2019 is not even officially here, but the race to 2020 already heating up. And if Hillary Clinton is considering another run for president, she may want to think again. New poll finds a staggering 70% of Democrats and independents do not think she should be on the ballot. A mere 15% would be excited to see her run again. Here now, former governor of Pennsylvania, Ed Rendell. He also, of course, formerly served as chairman of the Democratic National Committee. Good evening, Ed.
Good evening.
Pretty direct message to Hillary Clinton, isn't it?
Yeah, I don't think she has any intention of running. I think she was right. She'd like to be president. So would I like to be president. I just don't want to run for it. If I woke up tomorrow and found I was president, I wouldn't resign.
Yeah, there's a lot of people who might feel that way. Something caught my eye today in Vanity Fair. They posted a story saying that there may be a little trouble in paradise between Joe Biden and Barack Obama, specifically that, as you know, Barack Obama's been meeting with Beto O'Rourke and others. Obama World Insiders describe the former vice president as upset, not specifically by Obama's conversation with O'Rourke, but the fact that he has been meeting with a whole series of the former president's willingness to talk to other plausible Democratic contenders while Biden is still deciding whether to run himself. So you can see both sides of this. Biden wants everyone to sort of freeze. But Ed, you know better than anyone as a former DNC chair, there may be a dozen, 15, 20 other Democrats are ready to jump in on their own.
Sure, but I'm not sure that report's correct. But even if it is, my advice to Joe Biden is the fact that the president meets with other contenders doesn't mean that he's endorsing them or going to be for them and not for Joe. I am sort of the elder statesman of Pennsylvania Democrats, and I meet with anybody who wants to run for office, even if I know I'm supporting an opponent. I'll meet with that person, tell them what type of campaign I think he or she should run, tell them how I think they should go about it, how they should plan for the general election if they win the primary. So I don't think you read too much into that.
So, but Ed, as an elder statesman, in your party, as you say, the party's been moving further and further left. You see people like Alexandria Ocasio-Cortez and others, not just her, rising in the party. When Claire McCaskill, who was just ousted in Missouri, saying, wait a second, don't forget about white working class voters.
Right, and that's playing to Joe Biden's long suit. We will have trouble winning if we don't get back some of those white working class Democrats who voted for Donald Trump. The best person in our field, without any shadow of a doubt, to bring them back is Joe Biden. And I will want to correct you to one degree. The party has elected some people who are on the left side, far left side of the spectrum. But most of the governors who were elected, and Democrats took back 7 governor seats, were moderate left-of center Democrats. So I don't think this was a wave of progressive people getting elected. Most of the Congress people who got elected, the new 40 who took back Republican seats, weren't far out left-wingers. They were left to center moderates. So I don't think the party has moved. The party understands that we've got to win, and there are certain things on the far left agenda that I would love to see happen, but aren't going to happen, and we can't lie to people.
And I want to give you a platform for that. You just wrote an op-ed where you were talking about infrastructure and other issues that, frankly, President Trump has talked about, Democratic Senate Leader Chuck Schumer's talked about. And your advice to your party is, look, don't get lost in all these investigations. But are they going to listen? Because you've seen the report in Axios and elsewhere that there are literally dozens of subpoenas that when you say your party's not moving to the left, but sir, there are dozens of subpoenas they have ready to go to just go after the president on literally every issue.
Well, I don't think that's a left-center issue. But if we do that, and I heard there were 85 different subjects we were looking at for possible investigations, we do that at our peril. We've now got control of the Congress, and the American people say, okay, guys, what do you propose to do about the challenges facing the nation? We should legislate more than investigate. We should pass an infrastructure bill. It doesn't even matter if the Senate passes it or the president signs it. It'll be out there saying, this is what we do if we get control of the government. We should pass an immigration reform bill. We should pass amendments to Obamacare, if Obamacare is upheld by the courts, as I think it will be. We should pass real legislation directed at real problems. That's the way to win voters. Investigations, we've got Robert Mueller and a very talented team. Yeah. We should investigate the things that are not in the Mueller purview, but legislate rather than just investigate.
All right, we'll see if they take your advice. Ed Rendell, appreciate you coming in tonight.
Thanks very much.
All right, let's turn now to Karl Rove, former Deputy Chief of Staff to President George W. Bush, of course, and a Fox News contributor. Good to see you, Karl.
Merry Christmas.
Good, Merry Christmas to you as well. Hope the family is well. And I wonder, what say you about the Democratic Party and whether they've moved left or not?
Well, I think Governor Rendell put a little bit of a gloss on it. Yes, many of the Democrats who were elected to governorships in purple states were moderate to left of center. But even in the House races, like Kansas, suburban Kansas City, a seat in Kansas was won by a left-winger. In Dallas, Pete Sessions was knocked off by a candidate who spent the primary extolling his left-wing views and the general election disclaiming them. So I think the jury's yet out on how strong that class of 40 is going to be. But my sense is, yes, the Democratic Party is moving to the left. More people identify as liberals, fewer identify as moderates, and virtually nobody in the Democratic Party identifies themselves as conservatives. And that's that trend has been in train for a while and has only gotten more pronounced.
So, Karl, beyond what it means for Nancy Pelosi and her caucus in the House as they take power in 2019, what does it mean for 2020 when you've got Bernie Sanders talking about running again, Elizabeth Warren, and yes, there are going to be some centrists as well, in fairness to Ed Rendell, but there seems like there's a lot of candidates on the left fighting for votes and fighting for the hearts and minds of the Democratic Party.
Well, I think you got to look at it from two different ways. First of all, what's going to be the impact on the legislative process in Washington? I think Governor Rendell is absolutely right. Democrats would be smart to legislate, not investigate. But the left wing of the Democratic Party, and I put this in my column tomorrow in the Wall Street Journal, the left wing of the Democratic Party believes that compromise is bad, and that anybody who negotiates, Democrats who negotiate, are potential traitors. And so there's going to be a real pressure from the grassroots of the Democratic Party to investigate, impeach, and not legislate, as Governor Rendell talked about. But the other one is, what's going to happen in the 2020 presidential election in the Democratic primary? And there could be a moderate Democrat, a moderately liberal Democrat who emerges, who doesn't buy into the left-wing agenda, who could become a serious contender, because the left could be split up among, a number of highly credible left-wing candidates. And so there might be a lane available for somebody. Well, I doubt it, because he was elected as a mayor of New York as a Republican, but there might be a room for a Mitch Landrieu or maybe even Joe Biden will pick that lane to run in, rather than trying to sort of out Bernie Sanders or Elizabeth Warren or Kamala Harris. He may say, you know what, I'm going to run as a unifier, as somebody who will work with Republicans and Democrats. I'm going to serve one term, and I'm going to put the country in the right direction, and then retire to Delaware. That could be an appealing message, because everybody else is slicing up the left wing of the Democratic Party.
Karl, there's one other person, I've got 30 seconds, who seems to already be running, and that's Donald Trump. What's your advice to him tonight about the government shutdown and what's ahead with the wall?
Well, I wrote about it in my column tomorrow. You got to have an end strategy, and the president, by having that highly visible session in the Oval Office. Highly unusual. Made it hard for Democrats to sort of wiggle out of those positions. And we saw Nancy Pelosi basically taunt him over the issue of you can't get Republican votes. We got Schumer in that meeting saying, we don't, the wall's ineffective. I mean, as you know, Ed, from watching it, making legislation is sausage making, and that's not a pretty sight for the public to see sometimes. Better to try and see if you can cut those deals in the back room and then bring them out and have everybody explain. I think the answer is both parties ought to wake up and realize it's to their advantage to find a compromise in which each side gets something. Otherwise, the Democrats are going to introduce themselves as the new majority party in the House by depicting themselves as an unnecessary obstructionist.
All right. Karl Rove, appreciate your insight tonight.
Thank you, Ed.
Up next, an anti-Trump women's march canceled as controversial ties come to light between organizers and Nation of Islam leader Louis Farrakhan.
White folks are going down, and Farrakhan, by God's grace, has pulled the cover off of that satanic Jew.